Hello there, you're watching All 24 News, World News program with me, Karim Fazakri, and up next are the top stories. Algeria is doubling down on Justice for Africa, pushing to formally recognize colonialism as a crime and to secure real compensation for its victims. Also in our news, in Western Sahara, the Sahrawi president says he's open to talks with Morocco but slams Paris and Madrid, arguing colonial attitudes are still alive in Africa. Next up, in Gaza, Zionist forces ramp up their raids. Nearly 600 ceasefire violations have been logged as the UN denounces starvation being used as weapon of war. And in Florida, as the US and Ukraine chart their next steps, Russia fires back, accusing Kiev of terrorism and saying Europe is now sidelined from any peace process. The details are right up. Welcome back to the details. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, the International Conference on Colonial Crimes in Africa is back in session here in Algiers. Delegates are pushing for a united African position on historical justice, reparations, the return of cultural heritage, and protecting collective memory. This comes after the African Union backed President Abdelmadjid Tebboun's initiative earlier this year, tied to the AU's 2025 theme on justice and reparations. Over the next 2 days, ministers, legal experts, historians, and academics from across Africa, the Caribbean, and even beyond are weighing in. On the same occasion, Algeria's Foreign Minister of State Ahmed Attaf used his address to once again call for clear, official recognition of the crimes committed against African peoples during the colonial era. He said that acknowledging those crimes is the crucial first step to tackling a legacy that still weighs on many African nations, from exclusion and marginalization to chronic underdevelopment.
Drawing on this painful experience, Algeria firmly supports the core objectives defined by the African Union for this initiative, aimed at delivering historical justice. Africa is entirely justified in demanding the official and explicit recognition of the crimes committed against its peoples during the colonial era. Recognition is the bare minimum, a necessary first step toward addressing the legacy of that period, a legacy for which African states and societies continue to pay a heavy price in exclusion, underdevelopment, and structural injustice.
Algeria's Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf also announced a new project to push forward historical justice for the injustices suffered by African peoples. Speaking at the opening of the conference, he said the initiative aims to counter any attempt to erase history, twist the facts, or rewrite what really happened, and to secure a clear, accountable recognition of colonial crimes. Crimes, he stressed, that can't be time-barred, brushed aside, nor forgotten.
وبإطلاق مشروع إحقاق العدالة التاريخية هذا فإن إفريقيا تؤكد.
By launching this pursuit of historical justice, Africa affirms that its struggle continues as long as attempts persist to erase history, twist facts, and distort reality, as long as the crimes of colonialism remain unacknowledged in a clear and responsible manner, as long as the colonial phenomenon itself is not recognized in international law for what it truly was, a heinous, shameful crime that cannot be dismissed, ignored, or forgotten.
In the same context, African foreign ministers and experts also renewed their push for a solid mechanism to deal with historic injustices, including a proposal for an Africa-based international court to handle compensation claims. Angola's Foreign Minister Tito Antonio told the opening session that such a mechanism would show a real political and moral commitment to unity, justice, and restoring dignity.
La tenue de cette conférence
The second summit of heads of state and government of the African Union proposed an effective mechanism to address past injustices, and the foundations for joint agreement were established, including the proposal of an international reparations court based in Africa and a special committee tasked with dialogue with victims, peoples, and global institutions. These steps reflect a political and moral commitment to enhancing unity, restoring dignity, and building a narrative of resistance and hope.
Similarly, AU Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Bankole Adeoye, called for a united African stance to protect the continent's resources and cultural heritage. Speaking at the opening of the conference, he underlined the need for Africans to come together and formally criminalize colonialism.
We pay due homage to His Excellency Abdelmajid Tebboune, President of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, for graciously convening this international conference. The African Union Constitutive Act identifies as one of its core objectives and principles the total sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of its member states. It calls for unity, for solidarity, social cohesion, and cooperation amongst African countries and peoples. It is to this end that this Algiers conference rests on an unassailable historical and moral truth that colonialism constituted systematic violence, exploitation, and the negation of African values and identity. It therefore qualifies as a crime against humanity.
On a similar note, Caribbean Representative Eric Phillip urged former colonizers to own up to their crimes by offering tech transfer and debt relief to countries they once ruled. In his opening address, he praised Algeria's initiative, saying it helps bring together the voices of nations that lived through colonialism.
Caribbean zone is the most colonized zone in the world. We still have 20 colonies, British, American, Dutch, and French. So it's important that CARICOM participates in this event. These pernicious systems violated the fundamental human rights of Africans and demand immediate and ongoing redress. The many areas in which CARICOM has called for repair are outlined in the internationally acclaimed CARICOM 10-point plan for reparatory justice, which calls for an apology, repatriation programs to Africa, an indigenous peoples development program, establishment of cultural institutions, restitution of cultural property, cultural reconnection, and psychological healing. We also call for development through technology, debt cancellation, and monetary compensation.
On the same occasion and on the sidelines, Algeria's Secretary of State for African Affairs, Selma Bakhtamansouri, met with Ghana's Deputy Foreign Minister, James Jackie Quayson. The two reviewed bilateral ties and agreed to boost cooperation in areas like education, training, energy, and multilateral work. Mansouri also held talks with Somalia's Foreign Minister Ali Mohammed Omar, focusing on African issues on the UN Security Council agenda and the need for African-led solutions. Both meetings reaffirmed support for just causes, including Western Sahara, stressing that self-determination and respect for international law are key to lasting peace.
We discussed on our bilateral engagement and how our relation can be strengthened. My President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud was recently in Algeria. That visit was very successful, and we have very vibrant and growing bilateral relationships, and we are very, very grateful the support of Algeria is given to Somalia.
In Algeria still, on the eve of the 12th session of the Iran process on peace and security in Africa, set for December 1st and 2nd in Algiers, Foreign Minister and Minister of State Ahmed Attaf met with Jean-Pierre Delacroix, the UN's Assistant Secretary General for Peacekeeping. The two reviewed the latest security developments across the continent and the growing challenges facing peacekeeping missions. They also exchanged views on the situation in the Sahel-Saharan region and the newest updates on the Western Sahara file.
I believe our partnership with the African Union is fundamental. Algeria plays a crucial role in this regard, and it's a pleasure for us to be here in Algiers to discuss how we can work together to find solutions to the conflict and crisis that unfortunately affect Africa.
In a separate development, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, on Sunday rolled out new measures to help boost purchasing power. Chairing the cabinet meeting, he approved an increase in the minimum wage and unemployment benefits and said proposals to raise pensions will be reviewed at the next meeting. He also asked the Labour Minister to update the system for unemployment benefits and extend payments for 1 year with the option of pushing it to 2 years under certain conditions. And in another news story, Algerian Land Forces Commander Lieutenant General Mustafa Ismaili met Chinese Ambassador Kong Li Dong on Sunday in Algiers to discuss strengthening military cooperation. The Ministry of Defense said the talks focused on consolidating ties and expanding collaboration in the military sector. On Sunday, National People's Assembly President Ibrahim Boughali received Pan-African Parliament President Fortune Charoumbira and his delegation for an official visit. Charoumbira praised Algeria's commitment to peace and just causes and stressed the need to strengthen ties between the Algerian Parliament and the Pan-African Parliament, especially to boost the capacity of African parliaments to oversee governments and promote accountability.
Our meeting focused first of all on the conference that is taking place here in Algiers for 2 days, starting today 30 November, ending tomorrow 1 December. The conference that's calling on Africa and people of African descent to push for reparations, restoration, and ensuring justice following colonialism and slavery and the other epochs in our history. We are all aware that we can't forget what the Africans, people on this continent of Africa, and those from the diaspora, called the Caribbean side, what they went through in terms of pain, injustice, ill treatment, deprivation.
Turning to Western Sahara now, Sahrawi President Ibrahim Ghali reaffirmed the Polisario Front's readiness for serious and conditional talks with the UN Secretary General and his personal envoy. Speaking at the closing of the 11th Congress of the Sahrawi Youth Union, Ghali also criticized what he called attempts to misuse UN Security Council Resolution 2797 to push Morocco's expansionist agenda at the expense of the UN Charter.
The Polisario Front stands ready to cooperate with the efforts of UN Secretary General and his personal envoy, and to engage in serious and sincere negotiations without preconditions under the auspices of the United Nations. Our people, particularly the youth, have expressed their unwavering commitment to defending these just rights by all legitimate means, and their firm rejection of imposed solutions that circumvent the legal status of the Western Sahara conflict, which is a decolonization issue to be resolved by enabling the Sahrawi people to sole sovereign, to exercise their right to self-determination and independence in the same manner as other countries and peoples of the world.
On the same occasion, President Ghali called on Spain to take responsibility for its historical role in Western Sahara and urged France to stop backing Morocco's military occupation.
We reiterate our call for the Spanish government to assume its responsibilities as the legally administrating power of Western Sahara and to fulfill its duty of competing the decolonization of the last colony in Africa rather than maintaining its blatant bias in favor of the Moroccan exceptionist thesis, from which Spain itself has not been, nor will it be, immune. We also renew our call for France to abandon its futile position of supporting the illegal Moroccan military occupation of Western Sahara, a stance that serves neither peace nor stability, nor relations of cooperation and coexistence in the Mediterranean region and Northwest Africa.
In a related development, Algeria's Foreign Minister of State Ahmed Attaf stressed the need to end the occupation of Western Sahara, Africa's lost colony. Speaking at the opening of the International Conference on Colonial Crimes in Africa, he highlighted the Sahrawi people's continued commitment to their internationally recognized right to self-determination.
It's time to eliminate the vestiges of colonialism in all its forms and manifestations. But at the same time, we must not forget that it is imperative to definitively dismantle colonialism itself. To our brothers in Africa's lost colony, Western Sahara, I wish to express my solidarity and support as they cling to their legitimate and legal right to self-determination, as affirmed and continuously reaffirmed by international legitimacy and by the United Nations doctrine on decolonization.
الشرعية الدولية والعقيدة الأممية في مجال تصفية الاستعمار.
On a related story, the 49th European Coordination Conference for Support and Solidarity with the Sahrawi people wrapped up Saturday in Paris. Its final declaration, reaffirmed the Sahrawi people's inalienable right to independence and self-determination. Here's Karim Mustafa now.
Self-determination and respect for the decolonization process in Western Sahara were reaffirmed in Paris on Sunday. As the 49th UCOCO summit concluded, the final declaration is being described as a pivotal moment in the Sahrawi people's ongoing struggle. On this occasion, various participants urged France to defend the fundamental right of the Sahrawi people before international institutions, along with Spain, to assume its responsibility in pressing Morocco to end its occupation of Western Sahara.
It is a message to official France, which is that the Sahrawi people must have their right to self-determination. France recognized last year in July 2024 Morocco's sovereignty over the Sahara, and this is contradictory to international law.
The conference also highlighted the UN Security Council Resolution 2797, adopted by the end of October. At the same time, the symposium also stated its commitment to collaborating with the Polisario Front to defend the Sahrawi people's natural resources and demanded the immediate liberation of all Sahrawi political prisoners in Moroccan jails. For more than 30 years, the annual UCOCO conference has been the leading international gathering supporting the Sahrawi cause, with the Algerian National Committee for Solidarity with the Sahrawi people playing a central role in its organization.
Turning to Gaza now, the occupation forces have carried out airstrikes and shelling for the 52nd straight day, breaching the ceasefire. Explosions were reported in Rafah, with artillery hitting Bani Suhaila east of Khan Yunis. Gaza's health ministry said 3 were killed and 2 wounded in the past 24 hours, pushing ceasefire casualties to 356 dead and 908 injured. Rescue teams have recovered 607 more bodies since the ceasefire began. Since October 7, 2023, attacks have claimed over 70,000 lives and wounded nearly 171,000. Meanwhile, Gaza's government media office reported 591 documented ceasefire violations by Zionist forces as of Saturday, resulting in hundreds of deaths, injuries, and detentions. In a Sunday statement, the office warned that continued breaches threaten stability and urged the U.S. mediators, guarantors, and the UN Security Council to ensure the occupation fully respects the ceasefire and humanitarian rules. Meanwhile, UN Special Reporter on the right to water and sanitation, Pedro Araujo Agudo, said the ceasefire hasn't stopped the ongoing crisis in Gaza. In a Sunday statement, he accused the occupation of using thirst as a weapon, targeting water infrastructure and blocking fuel for wells and desalination plants. Agudo added that around 90% of water stations have been destroyed, raising fears of cholera and other deadly diseases. After months of Zionist genocidal war that brought schooling to a halt, children in Gaza are finally returning to classes, even in makeshift schools. Zara Frigeni reports.
In Gaza City, makeshift classrooms have been set up in the courtyards of schools to welcome students back. After nearly 2 years of a Zionist genocidal war, children are once again attending lessons, while teachers and parents share their hopes for the future.
With a radiant smile, we headed to the educational center after 2 years of war. We've been longing for this moment. Even the students and parents were very enthusiastic. These smiles came back on the faces of our children, which had been absent for nearly 2 years. They were separated in different classes, from kindergarten to the 9th grade, through 3 study periods, a first period, an intermediate period, and then a third period.
The classes are being held in temporary tents with limited resources. There are no uniforms and textbooks are scarce, but teachers are doing their best to ensure that learning continues.
The educational point is free, but we still need basic resources for the educational center, whether for the students, the teachers, or the teaching administration.
For the children themselves, simply returning to class is a source of joy and hope.
I feel happy because I will learn and be more motivated. We suffered along during the Gaza war when school stopped, but we still learn at this school, and I will become a doctor, hopefully.
Providing a fragile return to learning for thousands of students is not easy. Yet, despite the ongoing challenges, the first day back at school brings smile, hope, and a sense of normalcy for Palestinian children in Gaza.
Turning to the occupied West Bank now, Zionist forces have launched a large-scale raid on Sunday. The Palestinian news agency reported at least 17 arrests, including 3 recently released prisoners in Sa'ir, east of Al-Khalil, with dozens more detained amid heavy troop deployments across multiple areas. On a related note, Algeria's Foreign Minister of State Ahmed Attaf reaffirmed Africa's strong support for the Palestinian people. Speaking at the opening of the International Conference on Colonial Crimes in Africa, he stressed that African freedom isn't complete without the freedom of Palestine.
بالنسبة لأشقائنا في فلسطين.
Likewise for our brothers and sisters in Palestine, in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in occupied Al-Quds, we affirm Africa's steadfast commitment to the words of its late leader, Nelson Mandela, who said that our freedom as Africans remains incomplete without the freedom of Palestine. What brings us together today is not merely a slogan we raise, but a responsibility entrusted to all of us, a duty we have no choice but to fulfill, fully and faithfully. Let us truly be worthy of this responsibility, worthy of the sacrifices of our noble ancestors, and worthy of writing a new chapter that does justice to our history and brightens and dignifies our future.
ويشرف ويضيء مستقبلنا.
And at the Popular Front and in Morocco, thousands of Moroccans took to the streets on Saturday evening to protest continued normalization with a Zionist entity. Organized by anti-normalization groups in cities including Rabat, demonstrators warned of what they called Zionist infiltration and accused the regime of complicity in the occupation's crimes against the Palestinian people. To another topical story, Ukrainian authorities reported 3 dead and several injured in Russian drone attacks Saturday evening in Kherson. Drones hit homes, killing 2, while near Kiev, 1 person was killed and 11 injured. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry said its air defenses shot down 33 Ukrainian drones over Rostov, Krasnodar, Belgorod, Kursk, and the Black Sea region. Ukrainian and U.S. officials are meeting in Florida to discuss a potential path to end the war in Ukraine amid escalating tensions in the Black Sea. Here's Salman Asif.
Negotiations kicked off Sunday between a Ukrainian delegation and U.S. officials to review President Trump's plan for ending the war in Ukraine. According to Ukraine's National Security Council, Secretary Rostam Umerov, the talks are focused on Ukraine's security and post-war reconstruction.
Thankful to President Trump's super team that is supporting us. We are discussing about the future of Ukraine, about the security of Ukraine, about no repetition of aggression of Ukraine, about prosperity of Ukraine, about how to rebuild Ukraine. And we are thankful for the efforts of United States and its team to helping us. U.S. is hearing us, U.S. is supporting us, U.S. is walking beside us.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner are part of the discussions. Rubio says the goal is clear: to lay out a path that guarantees a sovereign Ukraine.
The end goal is obviously not just the end of the war, obviously that's central and fundamental. We want to see the end of the killing and the death and the suffering, and I'm sure the Ukrainian side, I know they do as well, they want peace. But it's also about securing an end to the war that leaves Ukraine sovereign and independent and with an opportunity at real prosperity.
Meanwhile, Russia is condemning Ukrainian strikes on oil tankers as Caspian pipeline infrastructure in the Black Sea, calling the attacks terrorist acts that endanger navigation and target civilian energy facilities. For his part, Lavrov also accused Europe of walking away from peace talks, saying it wasted opportunities to resolve the conflict and undermine previous agreements.
We assume are stated by members of the Russian presidential administration, including Yuri Ushakov, and I believe it's obvious to everyone that Europe has effectively withdrawn from the negotiations. The Europeans undermined our previous agreements to resolve the conflict in Ukraine, and thus Europe has squandered all its opportunities.
As talks continue in Florida, Kyiv and Washington aim to chart a path towards security and post-war reconstruction, while tensions on the ground and diplomatic clashes with Moscow underscore the fragility of any potential settlement.
Back to Africa now. Libya's government of national unity rejected turning the country into a stage for international conflict, emphasizing Tripoli's role in regional security. Speaking at the Libyan Diplomacy Conference on Sunday, Prime Minister Abdelhamid Dbeiba said Libya seeks genuine peace through dialogue, mutual respect, and a foreign policy rooted in reason and wisdom.
لا يخفي عليكم أن ليبيا
We do not hide the fact that Libya still faces major challenges, which makes it all the more necessary to adopt a unified and coherent foreign policy. Libya is not a battleground, it is a nation striving for true peace and determined to be an active partner in regional security and eager to become a destination for investment and development. We must build dialogue based on wisdom and reason and make that path our priority.
Elsewhere in Africa, in Sudan, media reports say the army bombed gatherings of the SPLMN allied with the RSF in South Kordofan. A military source said drones struck forces west of Al Abbasiyah after detecting their movements, while the army also repelled an RSF counterattack on Bab Nusa in West Kordofan. Meanwhile, the World Food Programme has declared famine in Kadugli, south of Sudan, and Al Fashir in North Darfur, citing one of the world's worst food crises. The UN says hunger is worsening in conflict zones where civilians are hard to reach. Meanwhile, UN humanitarian coordinator Dennis Brown warned that tens of thousands in Al Fashir face a dire situation under RSF control, with aid hampered by funding shortages and security restrictions.
Tens of thousands of people in the city of Al Fashir in the Darfur region are facing an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe. We need a safe corridor and a small team without any armed militias to reach key locations and evacuate the wounded and those trapped. The UN is still unable to provide sufficient support to survivors, and the situation is worsening day by day due to the funding shortages and security restrictions imposed by the armed forces. Therefore, we warn the international community that if the situation continues like this, it could lead to an even greater tragedy.
And finally, it's time to catch up on more news stories making headlines worldwide with Sofia Canturi in the News in Brief.
Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez said Caracas has activated all multilateral and legal mechanisms to oppose what she called Trump's illegal closure of Venezuela's airspace. She added that the government has prepared plans to help stranded Venezuelans abroad and facilitate travel for those wishing to leave the country. Deadly floods and landslides have struck Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Thailand, killing hundreds in each country. Indonesia killing hundreds in each country. Indonesia reports 442 deaths, Sri Lanka 334, and Thailand 162, with large areas still cut off. Police said search teams are still fighting the damaged towers, where debris is slowing their work. Authorities warn the death toll could rise as access to some apartments remains difficult. An investigation is underway into how the fire spread so rapidly. President Abdelmajid Tebboune congratulated the Algerian team for winning first place at the Mathematics Olympiad in Moscow. He praised the students of the National School of Mathematics for their gold medal victory among 40 competing countries, calling their achievement exceptional.
And with this, dear viewers, we reach the end of our news for tonight. To catch up on any part you missed or get the latest updates, you can always visit our social media platforms. On behalf of all 24 News team, I'm Karim Fazakri signing off. Thank you for watching and do take care.